One day, in 1964, Paul McCartney woke up with a song stuck in his head. He thought it might be of his own invention, but he also thought that a song that beautiful coming to him all at once was probably too good to be true. So he started playing it for people. He hadn't come up with serious lyrics for it yet, so when he played it for people, he'd sing, "Scrambled eggs, oh, you've got such lovely legs." After singing it for enough people, he was convinced that he really did come up with it. And if you couldn't tell from my beautiful vocals earlier, it would become the song Yesterday. And, fun fact, he would later write Yellow Submarine in a very similar way, just sort of waking up with the song stuck in his head. One more fun fact before we go. Keith Richards also apparently wrote the refrain for Can't Get No Satisfaction in his sleep. So apparently really talented people can write songs in their sleep. Today I'm going to tell you about the most influential show in punk rock history. It was a Sex Pistols show played in 1976 in Manchester for just about 40 people. But legend has it that every single one of those 40 people either formed a band after this concert or influenced someone to form a band. Among these people were Howard Devoto and Pete Shelley, who formed the Buzzcocks, Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner, who formed Joy Division the next day, Mark Smith, who formed The Fall, which would later be a huge influence on Nirvana. Oh, and another you might know, a young Morrissey, who'd go on to, of course, be the lead singer of the Smiths. The Sex Pistols themselves at this point were not a big band, but by the time they played Manchester again, just 3 weeks later, they had audiences in the hundreds. And with that, the British punk rock movement was catapulted. So I don't know, something magical happened that night. On June 4th, 1976, childhood friends Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook attended a Sex Pistols show. They were so inspired by it that the next day they bought instruments and started a band. Ian Curtis found out they needed a lead singer and wanted to audition, but apparently they just thought he was a cool guy, so they let him in without an audition. Bernard said if we liked someone, they were in. Terry Mason was the fourth member, and the four called themselves Warsaw after a David Bowie song, but later changed the name to Joy Division. Now, this name is pretty controversial. Joy Division was actually the name of a sexual slavery wing in a Nazi concentration camp in the 1955 novel House of Dolls. Obviously not something they condoned, but still just kind of creepy. But even though they had gotten some fame and traction under this name, they decided to change it after their lead singer Ian Curtis committed suicide. Because they had made a pact in the beginning that if anyone left the band, they would go under a different name. They decided on the New Order of the Capuchin Front, which they shortened to New Order. One of these days I'm going to tell you guys about the love between Robert Smith of The Cure and his wife Mary Poole, because it's darling. Today I'm going to tell you about the love between Robert Smith and Tim Burton. Tim Burton idolized The Cure when he was young, which should surprise no one. It probably also wouldn't surprise you to know that Edward Scissorhands' hair is directly inspired from Robert Smith's hair. Just looking kind of goth. Trying to be kind of goth. What might surprise you is that Tim Burton asked Robert Smith to do the entire score for Edward Scissorhands. At this point, Tim Burton wasn't that well known, and also Robert Smith was kind of busy doing his 8th studio album, Disintegration, so he declined. It all worked out though, because that is when Tim Burton found Danny Elfman, and obviously that partnership became legendary. Robert Smith and Tim Burton became buds later though, and Robert Smith did a song for the Frankenweenie soundtrack. And guys, we've been sleeping on the Frankenweenie soundtrack. Here we all are together, best buds! One day, Stevie Nicks was talking to Tom Petty's wife, Jane Petty, about the time Jane Petty first met Tom. She said it was at the age of 17, but her strong southern accent made it sound like she said at the edge of 17. Stevie said that she liked the phrase so much that she wanted to write a song about Tom and Jane using that as a title. However, in December of 1980, John Lennon was killed, and Stevie Nicks lost her uncle to cancer almost immediately after. So she writes a song in the aftermath of grief and loss, with the dove representing the spirit leaving the body, and she uses the title that she'd planned to use for other things. And apparently, she'd never actually heard a dove call. She took the line from a menu that she saw in a Phoenix restaurant in 1980 that said, "The white-winged dove sings a song that sounds like it's singing ooh, ooh, ooh." I've always really loved this song, but listening to it again under the context of remembering a lost life, especially John Lennon's, really changed it for me. So definitely go give it a listen. Today I'll tell you about one of my favorite Radiohead songs, True Love Waits. Radiohead first performed this live in 1995, and for 2 decades they performed it live but didn't record it. The first live version is played on an acoustic guitar and is a much more optimistic feeling than the eventual recorded version. The recorded version uses a simple dreamlike piano and a lot more minor chords. A lot of people are interested in the change of tone. A big reason for it is because they wanted the arrangement to sound like a Radiohead song. Their producer said something about how they didn't want it to sound like an acoustic John Mayer song. But I think Thom Yorke probably had personal reasons for the change as well. I think Thom wrote the song at least in part about his wife, Rachel Owen. Thom and Rachel separated in 2015, and then Rachel died of cancer in 2016, the same year that the recorded version of True Love Waits was released. Thom sang Don't Leave with a hopeful, frantic acoustic in the beginning of their relationship, then again with a mournful, dreamlike piano at the end of her life. Both versions are absolutely beautiful, and I recommend listening to both. Let me know if you do. This is for all of you who saw my last video but were too lazy to look up True Love Waits by Radiohead. You should really listen to both versions in their entirety, but just so you get a gist, hear the choruses of both. And the 2016 version, you hear these ominous minor notes, and it kind of resolves itself here, but still sounds more like hopeless. I've been doing a little research about the history behind the word punk, and it's really fascinating. So the word punk was first used in a play in the early 1500s called Simon the Old King. Adventure Time fans? It was used to mean prostitute, and Shakespeare actually also used this word a lot to say prostitute. In the next couple hundred years, they started using it for other things like young gay men, hooligans, petty criminals, youths. It was first used in the context of music in 1899 by Otto Weiss in an article he wrote, and he just meant the word to mean really bad. It continued to get used for music sometimes, usually as a sort of ironically positive term. Like, oh, the music is kind of punk, but still enjoyable. But it's still used mostly outside of the context of music. Until it starts getting used for the Ramones in New York and the Sex Pistols in London. Punk magazine is formed in 1976, and it says, "We're done gatekeeping music. Here are some chords, go learn them and start a band." And people did. Punk was a kind of music and an ideology and a kind of fashion. Pretty cool.